Hi, this is Cindy Pope. I'm an artist from the Pacific Northwest. I'm here at the Cool Tools studio to tell you how to use EZ960 in the dry sheet form to make amazing punched earrings. Let's get started. And I wanted to show you some of the projects I've made. I've used a simple paper punch, an EZ960 sheet that's 2 cards thick, and I have a rolling video that can show you how to create this sheet. And these are the punched earrings. And it says just a paper punch, but you punch them out and you can create these teeny tiny, really detailed earrings. And I'm very excited to show you about it. Okay, before we get started, I'm going to share with you the tools that we're going to be using in this project. We're going to need distilled water. You'll need a piece of cardstock, a pencil, a circle template, one of the stamps that Cool Tools sells, and you'll need a sheet of EZ960, which comes in a 25-gram package and 50. I think 25 will work for this. And we need scissors. We need hole punches, and I have the 3.5 millimeter, the 4 millimeter, and the 8 millimeter sizes. You need some little 4 millimeter faceted cabs. They're CZ faceted cabs. Some applicator brushes, the little teeny tiny Princeton brush, tweezers, ball burrs, a 6 millimeter stone setting burr, and we'll need a micro fine sanding sponge and some little containers for our slip. Okay, I'm going to show you this little daisy paper punch, which is one I really like. And I'm going to punch a couple pieces with paper, and I always recommend you test your pieces first, because it's kind of fun to know exactly what it's going to look like when you're done. And paper really gives you that option. So when I first designed these earrings, I kind of played around with, whether I wanted to stack them, whether I wanted to flip it, and I decided it was really nice when I had 2 layers of petals. So I've made my design, and now we're going to go ahead and use this 2-card EZ960 sheet, which I show you how to roll in the rolling video. I'm going to go ahead and punch with this. One thing I'm trying to do is I'm going to try to get at least a couple byproduct earrings. So I'm going to try to punch not right next to the edge, and I have planned in the size of this sheet for that. So let's give it a try. And I often turn it over to get it all the way in there. And this, this is something you would normally do with paper type, but there is no paper type that's this thick, and you can really go fairly thick with EZ960 on some of these punches. So this clay behaves just like paper type, except with not the negative of the clay disintegrating when it touches water. So we're going to go ahead and punch the first one, and there we go. Perfect little punch. And I've got room around it, I think. I'm going to use a circle cutter. I'm just going to test and make sure I've got enough room, which I do. My hope is to get 2 sets of these earrings, but I want to get at least 1 set. My clay curved up a little bit at the end, so I'm just having a rough time getting it in there. You can see. The nice thing about this particular punch is if I push it all the way up to the edge, I'm going to have enough room for that circle. So it's a really nice punch. And I'm just going to go all the way around and cut 4 of them. Okay, I have all 4 punched out, and I'm going to do the circle now, and I'm going to choose which circle is going to be the right size. I do not want these cutouts to be too close to the edge. This one is about 1 1/4, and I think it's a really nice size. I'm going to try to get it centered, and then I'm just going to take a pencil and draw around it. I'm going to do the same with the second one. And if you don't center it perfectly, we're going to be able to sand them down. Another thing you can do with this clay is you can cut it with scissors. I'm going to use these Joyce Chen scissors, and I'm going to just cut using the end because the end is the fine cut, and I'm going to cut around that circle. And you could do this with any template that you have in your tool stash. And I go pretty slow because I'm not a great cutter. So it cuts amazing, and I will clean that up a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the second one. Okay, I've cut both these out, and I'm going to finish those up later. I'm going to work on these earrings first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the little bezels for these. So I'm going to use the extra clay that I have, and I'm going to punch these bezels out of this clay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the 8mm punch, and I'm going to punch 4 circles from 8mm. Now, it's a little tricky to get these out if you have like a little wire or something. I use my pliers. So now we've cut our 8mm circles. We've got 4 of them, and I'm going to punch holes out of these circles using some of the other cutters. I'm going to use the 3.5 and the 4, and you will see the method in which I trap this cab between the 2 layers. So we're going to start with the 3.5. One of the trickier things is getting it centered, so I'm going to get right down here. And what I do is I make a little mark and then I look at it and say, is that centered? And the 3.5 is the top one, so it's the most important one to be centered. I'm going to gently pull it off. And I got pretty centered. And instead of using tweezers, there's a little acrylic rod that you can use that's going to come with the kits. And it'll just pocket right out. And this is something we can save, and we could use that on another piece. I'm going to try to get in the center of this one also. And although this clay is extremely flexible, I'm still being quite careful with it. And now we're going to do 4mm. And then I'm going to put it together and you'll see why I've done that. Okay, so we've got our 8mm circles. 2 of them have a 3.5mm hole and 2 of them have a 4mm hole. Now I'm going to show you exactly how this process works. I'm going to take the 6mm stone setting burr, and in the 4mm ones, I'm going to just clean up the inside. You can also use a scalpel, but this works pretty well. And then we're going to take our stones out, and I'm going to show you how this trapping works. Let's put our piece on there too. And it's always good with dry construction, you can work through your process before you actually get to constructing, because the pieces are all dry. We're not going to destroy them by touching them. So kind of work through your process before you start adding slip. So what's going to happen is the hole, the circle with the 4mm hole is going to go on the flower. This is going to have a little seat to sit down inside. Then we're going to clean up one of the other ones, and it's going to, since it's slightly smaller, we are going to bevel the edge. And I'm using it, I use this for 2 things. I use it for beveling, and then I also use it for kind of cleaning up. It's a nice little burr. And then I'm going to put it on top. And I'm making sure it fits perfectly. And it's trapped in there, so when you fire, you're not going to have any problems with this falling out. Okay, so now we're going to construct this piece. And I'm going to take one of these little application brushes and I'm going to wet both sides of the flower right here, and then I'm going to join them together. You can add a little bit of slip to this if you want, but because it's joining flat, what you can do is with this brush is you just rub it around, and the tip of that brush has enough nap that it is actually creating slip and rehydrating the top surface of the clay. Because I'm going to overlap these, I don't need to do the outside flowers. But you never want to just add water. You want to really add water and move it around because you want a great join. And you can see the slip that ended up on my fingers. So at this point, we are going to put it on top. Oops. I'm going to use my tweezers to do this because these are tiny. I'm going to place it on top, and I'm not going to push it down till I have them just how I want them. And they look really nice a couple different ways, and you could totally add 3 layers. Once I've got it where I want it, and all the spires look like they're in the right place, that's the point where you add pressure. You never want to add pressure until it's right in the right place. I'm going to add pressure, and I'm going to put it on the heating surface. And I'm going to let that completely dry, and then we're going to reinforce in here and underneath to make sure we have a really nice join. All right, so we're still drying, and while that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and even out the edges on this one. So I'm going to line them up next to each other, and I'm just going to take this sanding sponge and just even it up. I also like to round the edges a little bit on my pieces. I like kind of a gentler aesthetic. So these will be ready to construct when we're at that point. So get them all nice and even, and then we'll be ready to construct those. So I'm going to take this one off the heating surface because it's now heated enough. And the first place I'm going to reinforce is on the back, because I can add slip water in between these spires and it's not going to show. And I think that's a really good, always reinforce from the back when you can, because it really makes a huge difference. And I have my little container of gunk and I'm going to use that. And when you sand, you want to sand over a tile, not over this mat, because the sandings will stick to the mat and we really want to reuse them. So whenever I'm creating slip, I'm on a tile. So we're going to mix it up a little bit. And in this case, I'm going to go with a smaller applicator. There's 4 different sizes of this applicator, and I've got the largest one. But I think it's going to be easier to get in there. And I can also, I'll probably follow up with the Princeton brush, which is my favorite brush that I own. During preparation, at one point I lost my Princeton brush and I had to stop working until I found it. I always say if you could get one brush or one tool, that's the one I would get. Especially if you like to work small, and I really like to work small. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to reinforce the front, but in the front I don't want to add slip because I don't really want to mess this up. So I'm going to just take some water. I'm going to take the Princeton brush and I'm going to run water along the edges, because I certainly cannot get in there to sand that. Or if I could, I would not want to take the enormous amount of time it would do to do that. And just adding water does help the connection. So we'll do this with both earrings. We'll reinforce twice to make sure we have a wonderful join. And now it's going to heat. Okay, we're going to pull this off the heating surface. The candle warmers are very hot, so I'm going to let it cool for a second. The tile will cool it up because I'm going to want to clean up the back a little bit. That's where I reinforced with the slip, and I'm just going to take the sponge and smooth it out. If you have any little bits inside, just take your Princeton brush and smooth them out. If you do a lot more reinforcing though, you are going to want to put back in the drying surface. And the front looks pretty good because, again, all I used was water, but you can clean up there if you need to. Now we're ready to add our stone. So I'm going to take the 4mm hole, and I'm going to attach it right there. I'm going to add slip to the back. I'm going to use the smaller applicator. This is teeny tiny. And again, I'm brushing it, but I don't want to put a lot of pressure on it because I don't want to break it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit more slippy water on the back because that's not going to be seen. I'm going to use my tweezers and place it. It's a little hard for me to place by hand. Don't push it down until you've got it centered. And the center of the flower should be pretty easy to find. Once you've found it, give it a little pressure. We can test a second time to make sure the stone fits in there. And these little stones are, I think, just beautiful. It's going to fit when it dries. We're going to let that dry, and then we'll reinforce. Okay, so our top is attached, so we're going to pull it over. I'm going to let it cool down for a second. And now we're going to reinforce all the way around. Remember, we're going to reinforce always twice because we really want a good join. Usually this little stone will pop out. It didn't pop out, but I want a little peephole in the back. You get a little bit more shine from these shiny, shiny stones, and you really want them to be as pretty as they are. So I'm going to take my little ball burr, and I'm going to drill a little circle for the light to shine through. And these are earrings, so remember, they are going to get some light. There, my stone came out. And I always, whenever I use ball burrs, I always start with the smallest one and I move up to the biggest one. I think you're less likely to have an issue, and also I can center it better when I get the bigger one in there. And you really, I didn't, on all the earrings, I didn't put a hole in them, but I really think it makes a difference. If you're using the 3mm stones, it's a little trickier to get a hole where the stone isn't going to fall through. So there we go, we have a hole. I'm going to do some reinforcing, and I want to show you the best place to reinforce is right in here because that's not going to be seen. And you, like we reinforced in the back, you always want to reinforce well on the places that nobody's going to see, just to make sure that this is never going to pop off. Because even if it got loose on these edges, if it was really well joined in the front, it would not cause a problem with the piece. And I'm all about structural integrity on your pieces. Nothing worse than having something pop off when it comes out of the kiln. And now I'm going to go through and reinforce all the way around on the edges for the first time, and then you'll go ahead and do it the second time. And because I'm on the front, I'm mostly using just water. Using slip is, for me, you know, if you use heavy slip, there's more cleaning to be done. And I like my reinforcing not to cause too much cleanup to be done. I'm the lazy jeweler. Always do it the easiest way. I'm going to reinforce in there a little bit too. So there we go. And we're going to dry it, and then we're going to add the top layer and the stone. Okay, we've reinforced twice, and now I'm going to pull it off the drying surface. I'm going to let it cool for a minute because this is really hot. I'm going to make sure that my peephole is nice and clean. If it isn't, I can just use the ball burr on the front and back just to make it look pretty. I like my holes looking really pretty. Okay, once that's done, we're going to set our stone in there. I'm going to push it down just to make sure it's all the way in the seat. Okay, so we've got the stone set in, and so we're going to take the 4.5mm bezel, and remember we took the part where we took our little burr. So I'm going to make sure you get the right side. I have been known to use the wrong side. I almost did right there. This clay is so white, it's a little tricky to see the details if you're my age. Okay, so we're ready to go. I'm going to get that ready to flip over and put on. But first, I'm going to wet this bezel. I'm going to use the tiny applicator brush because we are working with a small thing. And I'm going to use the slip water. And don't worry about getting your stone, try not to get your stone too dirty, but don't worry about it because the last thing you want to do whenever you're using stones is clean it up at the end. And this join is more important than a clean stone at this point. I'm going to do the same thing with the inside of this one. And I'm going to use my my tweezers to put it in the right place. And I'm not going to push it down until I'm sure it's properly centered, because you don't want that stone to look not centered. Sometimes you get the bezel over too far. But with the seat, it actually, when you've set the stone in, when you've got a seat for it, it's a lot easier to set the stone. This smallest stone could be done without a seat, but I think it's much easier. I'm putting pressure all the way around. And then before I put it to the drying surface, I'm going to take my little Princeton brush and I'm going to just add some water to join those two layers together. It's going to save me some reinforcing later, and it's going to help the first drying for that join. Okay, let's dry it. So we'll reinforce that 2 more times, and then I'm going to sand it to make sure those 2 parts were joined together well. Okay, it is dried. So we've got our piece with the bezel attached. It's really hot. I'm going to let it cool down a little bit. I've reinforced it around twice, and now I'm just going to do a little tiny bit of sanding, but I'm not going to sand it till it's cooled down. This particular clay, as it cools, gets more flexible, and I want some flexibility because I don't want to accidentally crack one of these, because they're very stiff right now, and that's because they're hot. Okay, it's cooled down. A tile is really good to cool it down. Now I'm just going to go around and sand to make sure everything looks nice and even. I'm also going to, if I need to, do some sanding on the back. Any kind of cleanup you need to do, I want to do all my cleanup before I put the hole in. The hole is the last thing I do. So we'll take a look at the back and make sure if it needs any cleaning. Okay, now we're ready to put a hole in it. And I'm going to show you how I do that. I take one of the ball burrs, and this one is the second from the smallest. I'm going to make a little hole. I'm not going to get too close to the top. This is EZ960, so it's really strong, but I don't want to break it, so I'm going to go right about there, which is fine for an ear wire. I'm going to put it down on the heating surface. You could also put it in the one in between. I like it in the front one. And I drill all my holes by hand. I like to be gentle, and I don't want to cause a problem with the clay because I've spent all this time making it. So that one is almost big enough. And I think the next one is a little bit too large. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to widen it a little bit. I always use the 6mm stone setter on all my holes because it makes them look so much better. And then I'm just going to enlarge this the tiniest bit. So there we've got a hole, and we're going to do the same thing with the next earring, and then we're going to fire them. We're going to fire, this is EZ960, we're going to fire it at 1675 for 2 hours, and then we're going to finish it. Okay, remember that piece we cut out and we made a circle around? We're going to go ahead and make those earrings. We're going to add a little embellishment. And if you remember, when we made these bezels, we cut out some little circles. So I'm going to use those as embellishments on these because I just like a little extra visual interest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some slip water and I'm going to put it where I'm going to place this. And I like to use this little Princeton brush. These are pretty tiny. I think it's a really good option. And then I'm going to take and I'm going to put this over in my puddle. If I don't have enough water, I need to add a little bit more. Then I'm going to move it around, and what this is going to do is it's going to rehydrate the bottom surface, and it's going to join so much better to this. And since I use the jewel tool to finish, and I finish very aggressively, I want these attached well, or they, if you don't attach it like this, it's going to fly off. So now I'm going to put it in the drying surface. I'll reinforce that 2 more times. And then I'm going to drill a hole, and let's move it up to the tile. I want a hard surface when I'm drilling a hole. And I'm going to use the 3rd biggest ball burr and just properly center it. And drill a hole, and then I always follow it up with this 6mm ring setting bezel. And I use a whole lot of these. It depends on how large your hole is, how big you want a bezel you want to use. I use them all, and you'll get a slightly different effect with a tinier one than you will with a bigger one. But whichever one you use, it's always going to enhance the look of the hole you have for your earring. And there we go. I'm going to dry it and then reinforce it, and we'll fire these. Okay, our flower earrings are fired, they're patinaed, they're finished, and we're going to go ahead and show them to you. I wanted to let you know there's lots of punches, so get creative. There's lots of biopsy punches, so you can punch all different kinds of stones. I hope you enjoy this project, and thanks for watching.
Visit our Learning Center at cooltools.us for more cool jewelry making videos. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and be sure to sign up for our email list to be the first to hear about new videos, new products, and other cool stuff from Cool Tools.